My younger son, at his secondary school, they've asked me to have him tested for asthma. It's definitely the impact of the mold.
There are far too many homes that don't meet decent standards, that are simply not fit for habitation at the moment.
Does somebody in here have to lose their life somehow for them to listen?
Since the coroner's report confirmed that 2-year-old Awab Ishaq from Rochdale died after prolonged exposure to mould and damp in his family's social home, there has been public and political outcry. Sadly, the conditions he was subjected to are by no means rare. We're in Westminster to meet mother of 4, Andy. Her flat here is plagued by black mould and damp. In September, the ceiling in her autistic son's room fell through and collapsed because of a leak. She is struggling to get help.
The problem started just months after we moved in. We had noticed paint peeling off the walls and the mold. It's a black mold and it spreads. It's hard to clean. Tried cleaning it because what we get told when we report it is open the windows. It's because you're not opening the windows enough. It always keeps coming back in a very short space of time. It's in literally every room. By my bed, my kids' beds, on the ceiling. My adult son with the autism and physical disabilities, his room is the worst. In terms of the mold and it's returning, it comes back very quickly. It's all over the paintwork. It gets onto his bed, his pillows. It just spreads. My son's already been in hospital with pneumonia for 3 months. I really worry because of his autism. He doesn't quite get how dangerous it is for him to keep breathing in those mold spores. So my fear is him getting really, really sick because of it, because we're all coughing, we're all on inhalers. It's hard in the sense that everyone in here is mentally affected. We're all in therapy. My oldest daughter, she has asthma. And for me as well, it's the same with an inhaler. We tend to cough and cough and cough.
Conveniently, Andy lives just a stone's throw away from Westminster, so we're going to see Mr. Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Housing, and we're going to ask him what he plans to do about the shocking state of homes in this country. Michael Gove, you're the Secretary of State for Housing. We have had a huge housing crisis for years, and now a child, a 2-year-old, has died. Your party has been in government for 12 years. How are you going to stop more people dying?
Well, we all recognise that there is much more that we need to do in order to give tenants a fair deal, in both the social housing sector and the private rented sector. And Awab Ishaq's death is a very, very powerful reminder of how much more there is to be done. So we're introducing legislation which will ensure that tenants' voices are heard, that the regulator has more powers to deal with landlords that are not looking after properties and not looking after tenants. You're right, this legislation should have been introduced earlier. It was meant to be introduced quickly after the Grenfell disaster, but I hope that people will recognise that the laws that we're bringing forward now will make a difference.
When a social landlord does not take their tenants' complaints about poor conditions seriously, as we saw in the case of Rochdale Borough-wide Housing and Awab Ishaq's family, what is your plan? What sanctions are you going to impose? What are you going to do to make them take notice?
My concern with Rochdale Borough-wide Housing is not only did they not respond appropriately to the complaints that Awab Ishaq's father made, that when they did have contact with the family, their attitudes were rooted in prejudice and ignorance, and then they hid behind legal process to avoid dealing with them. And then when they were confronted with the consequences of their failure, they refused properly to acknowledge that. That's just not good enough. So one of the things that I'm saying to them and to other housing associations that are not doing a good job is the government money that we have available that helps to support your work, we are not going to provide you with the money that you expected if you fail to uphold decent standards. Your first responsibility is to your tenants to make sure that they're in decent conditions, so there will be direct financial sanctions until and unless you up your game. Well, not only tough talk, but I hope tough sanctions that will bite in order to get them to appreciate the scale and the nature of their responsibilities.
As we've discussed, Awab Ishaq is not the only child living in these conditions. Earlier this week, I was with a woman who has an autistic and disabled son. There is a hole in his bedroom which was caused by a leak. There is no light. She cannot cope. It is now more clear than ever that the housing crisis is a public health crisis. What are you doing to convince the rest of the government about that?
Well, I think that the housing crisis is a crisis on many levels. I think we don't have enough homes in this country, and we don't, in particular, have enough decent homes. And the government recognises that this is a crisis that needs to be resolved on many levels. And you're right, there is a public health issue here. If we're going to make sure that the NHS is there for people when they need it, we need to deal with the avoidable causes of illness that exist out there in society. And one of the principal causes of avoidable illness is poor housing. We know that some of the housing stock in this country is old, out of condition, and needs to be replaced, absolutely. But in the meantime, we have to repair and improve the condition of the homes in which so many people live.
Fighting talk from Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Housing. But as he himself noted, private and social renters have been promised more rights and legislative reform for years. They can't wait much longer. This is quite literally a matter of life or death.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Gino Lamont.
And I'm Elizabeth Bobian. A woman in La Quinta says her apartment is toxic. Black mold growing in the bathroom and closets. She's complained to her landlord since January, but isn't getting any answers.
So she called KMIR6 News to investigate. KMIR6's Adriana Weingold spent the day looking into possible health and safety violations and joins us now. Adriana.
Well, we went straight to the source to find answers, talking to both the tenant and trying to talk to the landlord, but the landlord turned us away. Bethany and her 2-year-old son were forced to move after they grew increasingly ill.
I started complaining in January of this year about an odor in my house. Believed it was mold. Their solution was changing my air filter. They've now changed that twice, and after complaining for the last 7 months, still nothing has been done.
After a strange smell began to surface in her apartment in La Quinta and visible signs of water damage appeared in closets and bathrooms, Bethany thought perhaps it was mold that was making them sick.
He's had a constant ear infection for the last 6 months that can't seem to go away by the antibiotics. He's run fevers, talking like 102, 103 degree fevers, throwing up in the middle of the night for no reason. Thought maybe it was just a common cold. Myself, I've had the migraines, sinus problems, just all around kind of sluggish, everything hurts.
Bethany says the apartment managers took a mold sample and told her it turned up negative, but Bethany hired her own environmental health agency for private testing, and they found toxic black mold spores in the apartment. We tried contacting the managers at Villa Cortina Apartments, but were turned away.
I spoke with Ala right after I spoke with you, probably about 20 minutes later, and gave her your contact information, and she was going to contact you.
There's no comment you can give to
I
us?
can't give you any comment, and at this point, because it's private property, we would have to ask you to leave.
So we left, but we're still waiting for that call. As for Bethany, she's moving out and she wants her money back. She also wants the apartment fixed properly so future tenants don't suffer the same sickness as she and her son. Bethany says she also contacted the state to see if they would send someone out to inspect the apartment, but she said she was told they simply don't have the money or resources. Back to you.
All right.